My mum was very supportive of when I was starting to lose weight, even when she was ill and she was getting worse. She went into hospital not long after I started, probably a week or two, and then into hospice. But she was telling all the nurses how ill I was doing, because my mum was boasting about, he's lost 4.5 pounds this week. He's lost 3 stone in total. At this point, I'm still 34 stone, 33 stone. But if someone's that supportive, I mean, my mum was super supportive of that sort of thing. So she was delighted, I think, finally to see that I was doing something about it.
Slimming Stories is branching out. I've created a Facebook group, and over the next couple of months I'll be building the community, starting with live Slimming Story conversations. This is your opportunity to feature on one of the upcoming podcast episodes and share your weight loss journey. Are you with me? All you need to do is just click on the link in the podcast show notes or search for Slimming Stories within the group feature on Facebook. I would love to see you there. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Slimming Stories. I'm your host, Claire Alden-West. Welcome again to another episode of inspiration. This is Phil Kaye's part 2 of his Slimming story. If you've not yet listened to last week's episode, I just want to give you a quick recap. Phil spoke about how after only 3 weeks on plan, it just felt this drive of energy, this change where he wasn't being sluggish in the morning. So I've put a slight recap at the start of the episode for anybody that maybe has downloaded this episode on the way to work and have not downloaded last week's, so that's just for you. And I also want to dedicate this episode to all the mums out there that have supported their sons and daughters on a weight loss journey. And if you've listened to the very beginning of this episode, you will have heard that Phil's mum was no exception. She had his back 100%. And we find ourselves, don't we, with Mother's Day well and truly behind us now. If you listen to this on late Mothering Sunday Eve, it's gone, it's done. If you've been bought chocolates and all those treats, then I guess it's whether you decide to have them all today or to save them or to even gift them to somebody. And it's one of those times that we're gifted the food that can send us way, way off track. It really can. And it can be a testing time, especially, if chocolate is your go-to food, because chocolates are of abundance around Mothering Sunday. I'm no different. I've been bought chocolates today, and yeah, I'm thinking about having a couple tonight and then maybe giving them to my husband to hide out of the way. I just don't want to consume 4,000 worth of calories in a day. That's not on my agenda at all. And I also want to say that last week I mentioned that Phil had lost over 21 stone. As a matter of fact, he's lost over 22 stone now. So it may be at the point that I interviewed him that was the case, which I think may have been back in August last year. So that's definitely a change. Is introducing Phil Kaye to his part 2 of Slimming Stories.
I noticed after 3 weeks, the difference in energy of how I felt as a result of that, because I was just eating better. So after that first week, all the crisps and the biscuits were gone, and I didn't replace them. I didn't buy the wee hi-fi bars or any sort of low-fat snacks that they all talk about. I went cold turkey on them. But after 3 weeks, it felt amazing. It really was. It was bizarre. The energy levels just went through the roof, and it was. I'm still, at this point, I'm 35 stone, 35 stone plus, but I couldn't get over how alert and sharp my mind was compared to where I was in 3 weeks beforehand. My sleeping pattern completely changed in the space of 3 weeks. I went from going to sleep at 1 o'clock in the morning, struggling to get out of bed at 8:30 to get into work, I would have woken up at 6:30, and it was, as soon as I woke up, I felt awake. Whereas before it would have been snooze button again to try and sort of wake up in installments. And I would have had 3 alarms all around to try and force out of bed.
Do you think a proportion of that energy was the fact that you'd actually finally found something that worked. And that's a big weight to carry, isn't it? To think that nobody can help you. That's your life, that's your story. That's going to be you for the rest of your life. There's going to be nothing that's going to change it. And all of a sudden, you're awake, aren't you? You can see, that there's possibility, that there's hope, and that there's something that works for you. You don't feel hungry. You feel satisfied, and it's almost like a reawakening, isn't it? It's almost like a rebirth of you. You finally, you've got something that works for you, and you're happy with it. You're not criticising it. You're not seeing that it's difficult. It seems to have been quite an easy transition for you.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a combination, because it clicked. Having that realization that I could actually do something about this. That I don't have to live my life the way I was living it forever, which wouldn't have been very long, let's be honest, at the size I was. But that this was something I could actually stick to, and it didn't feel difficult. That's the weird thing, because I'd found food that I liked and I could make. It was really simple food. It was your bologneses. It was basically, pasta with a sauce, but it was a sauce made from just tinned tomatoes, puree, and just whatever. The food was it was really, really basic, but I was a really basic eater anyway. I just found that for some reason, it worked. And it worked for me. The combination of the group, the feedback, the positivity, that was a big I found was mindset of just relentless negativity that I had about myself, that all of a sudden was actually starting to feel good for the first time in a long time. Probably the first time I was actually feeling good about myself, really, since I was in my teens. That's honest. Reacted to my friends, this sort of reasonably jolly persona. I wasn't like a comedian or anything, but it was just that sort of mask of being able to get on with people. But I just found that suddenly I felt alive for the first time.
I mean, I just think you're a book in the making, honest to God. You really are. And how did your father react to you? Your poor father that had tried to speak to you for all these years. What was his reaction when he could see, the weight coming off, and he could actually see you was going with it, and you'd found something that you was actually enjoying and it was working for you? That must be such a thing to witness for a father, to see that, and then to see not only the change from a physical point of view, but the change of you being more alert and alive and happy.
I think he probably at the start he didn't want to scud anything, so he didn't really mention it too much. And to be honest, I mean, I didn't say to them that I'd signed up and I was feeling this way. I was still, but they would have noticed that I was making meals and I was prepping my own dinner, as opposed to coming in and throwing a pizza into the oven and then eating a bag of rubbish, because he wouldn't have seen the bags and the rubbish all gathered up in the bins. So he didn't say much. My mum would have said more, because turns out, I only found this out after she died, was she was on Slimming World at the time that when I joined up, but she wasn't well. Again, sort of like, this was one of the triggers, was definitely one of the triggers for when I signed up, was hadn't been diagnosed at this point, but she didn't look well. I was starting to be conscious that at some point she's not going to be here. There's a chance that I might actually die before, because the way I was living, who knew how long I had? Certainly wouldn't have been that long. I was also conscious, like I was back living with my parents, and I was living on the third floor of our house, and I was starting to worry about stuff like, if I fell, how do I get back up? If God forbid I died in my sleep, how do they get me out of this house? Because how do you lift someone that size? Stuff like that. That's this kind of negativity I carried around with me in my head. I didn't talk about that sort of stuff with anybody, but with Laura, I'd mentioned about my mum a wee bit, but so stuff like that, it was starting to add up. And I think that was propelling me as well. But my mum was very supportive of when I was starting to lose weight. Even when she was ill and she was getting worse, she went into hospital not long after I started, probably a week or two, and then into hospice. But she was telling all the nurses and how well I was doing, because my mum was boasting about, he's lost 4.5 pounds this week. He's lost 3 stone in total. At this point, I'm still 34 stone, 33 stone, but if someone's that supportive, I mean, my mum was super supportive of that sort of thing. So she was delighted, I think, finally to see that I was doing something about it. My dad was, I'm sure he absolutely was delighted for me, but he didn't say anything. He didn't say too much, because at that point, like, my relationship with my dad was bloody awful, to be honest.
I guess I didn't want to test the water and ruin it. And what a lovely gift to be able to give to your mum before she passed, knowing that you'd finally cracked the code and you was getting the help and you was changing your life.
So I'd find something that I could work with in my life, and I was starting to have that realization that get to a point where I could live a normal life. I had no idea where it would end up. But certainly, if you'd said to me, "Oh, you'll lose 22 stone," and I would never ever thought I would get to this point. Never ever. Even when I got to 15 stone, I never thought, because I know people, when they sign up to somewhere, they're asked about like their target. I had no idea, because I had no idea what a healthy version of me would weigh. So I'd never set a target. It was always just a case of, well, I'll see what next week was. And they ask in the group, how much would you like to lose next week, or what result would you like to see the next week? And I always just said 2 pounds. 2 pounds would be brilliant for me, because they always said 1.5 to 2 pounds is a sustainable loss. So that's all I ever wanted. I wanted it just to have a plan that I could live with, that would allow me to keep it, to get to a point where, who knows, as long as I'm free of the physical restrictions.
Don't say so well. Your consultant must be like, she must be beaming with pride for you, and imagine the group too. And what I'm really interested in is, how was it when you recognised this weight was coming off, and then you would have a belt, wouldn't you? And then you put it down a notch, and then you put it down a notch. At what point did you actually lose that belt?
I actually still wear that belt. I have cut off. I kept it. Bought. Yeah, I still actually wear it as well. I bought. This is. I don't know whether this is good or not, or whether it says a lot. But I literally bought it 2 months before joining Slimming World, and it was like, belt. I'm happy. I don't want to have to keep buying a new one, so I bought a wee hole punch on Amazon. To make new ones. So every so often I would punch new holes, and I kept the belt. I don't know whether it was just as a physical manifestation. I actually kept 2 belts, one of them a jeans belt and a other smaller one just for trousers, but I've got rid of it, but the jeans belt I still have, and I just kept, and I didn't cut any off it, but I got to a point where it was almost it was the small of my back, where I decided, right, now I need to cut stuff off it. But I ended up of the full belt and all the sections. I kept it because I wanted that physical manifestation of how I was progressing, and
Definitely.
I loved that feeling of being at the furthermost hole and realizing that no, I need to cut more on it. I did keep stuff like that, and my friend Laura, God bless her, I thank her for this all the time. But she insisted on taking photos of my first night, so she actually got me up against the wall, and she did like a profile pic and a side on pic, and she basically said, "Look, I'll keep these. If you ever want them, I'll have them." In my head, it was just, I'll never ever see them photos. I never want to, because at this point, I'm still convinced it would fail. But like after, I think 8 months, I'd lost 10 stone. And I was like, I wouldn't mind seeing a comparison of it. So I said to Laura, and she changed her phone, but she was able to recover them, thankfully. So like it took, I don't know, it just took so long for me to accept that this is me now, and I'm just going to carry on this journey. In my head, I knew I was having success with it, and I knew I could do it. Basically, repeat that pattern week after week. I was always a pattern eater, so I ate the same thing all the time, whether it was crisps, pizza, chocolate, whatever it was. I ate it all the time. I would basically eat it until I got bored of it, and then I would switch the chocolate bar to a different one, switch the pizza to a different topping. So I knew I could stick to a routine.
Yeah.
It was just a routine that worked. And then finding stuff that I could make as part of the routine.
Brilliant. You know. It's like you literally started from scratch, didn't you? Learning that. And you know, it's never too late, is it? It's never too late to make that change. And I love the belt story, because I could just see you there saying, "And I bought this 2 months ago. I'm not going to get rid of that." And I think you need to patent that. I think you need to patent that old punch thing that you use. Honestly, yeah. So to Weight Watchers and Slim and Will, but you need that reminder, don't you? A lot of people have like this. They keep a pair of trousers, or obviously not in your case a dress, but they keep these different things, don't they, as a reminder. And it's a great thing to have. And did you start buying new clothes when you saw that your size was reducing? Did you start buying new clothes, and how did that feel? Did you go online to buy the clothes, or did you go into a store to buy the clothes?
I started needing new clothes pretty quickly. I hadn't bought clothes in an actual shop for 20 odd years, because all of my shopping was online, because there was occasional. There was in Belfast a bigger man's clothes shop, but even they had very, very few things in my size. Like, I was wearing most of my t-shirts, which was pretty much all I ever wore, were size 8XL, 68-inch chest, or 68 or 70-inch chest. So, I mean, you can only buy them online. There's very, very, even then, there's a very limited selection. My waist and the jeans were size 68-inch waist. I still have them. So I was still buying stuff online, but I was lucky enough in that, as I had bought clothes for years, occasionally I would buy stuff and it would be too small, and I was too embarrassed to send it back and ask for a bigger size. So I still had stuff in my house that I knew was, so I started to work through them initially. And then my friend Kaye, because at this point he had lost about 7 or 8 stone at this point. He had given me advice, was, when you buy stuff, buy as cheap as you can and buy a size too small, because by the time it arrives, the way you're losing weight, it'll be fine. Or by the time you actually first wear it, it'll be the size you need it to. You'll be the size that will fit into it. So that was actually a big help, and it was expensive business going through, because like the first time I started buying clothes, it was 6XL. I started buying shirts in, so you still had to go online to get them. But I found a shop in Belfast where I saw they did up to 5XL. I think it's Very. I can't remember what you call it, but it's an offshoot of it, and it's one wee stall in it. So I went up there, and I was so happy to be able to actually buy stuff off a peg for the first time, because I literally hadn't went into a shop and bought stuff for, say, well over 20 years. So that was exciting the first time, and I do remember buying one at the size I was, one at the size, one size down, and then another 2 sizes down. So I bought 3 sizes, basically as a goal for myself, because I remember Kaye's advice was basically buy one below. So I thought, I'll set a goal at that size as well, which was still a 4XL or 3XL at that point. And it was just, every so often it would just be, I'll try that one on. I'll be like, oh, it's not too bad, or like, yeah, it's still a bit snug, I'm not wearing that out, but it'll do for the time being, an emergency. So so that was a thrill. I'm not even joking. I think probably about a quarter of my wages was in clothes at that point, because you're just burning through them. I really was, because I was lucky in that I kept losing weight. I did have gains, but the week, just month after month, I would lose basically a stone a month usually.
So we've looked at the self-talk when you was 37 stone and the horrible things you used to tell yourself and the negativity, and compare that to going into a store, still having weight to lose and buying not only a size that now fits you, buying 3 sizes. So that is such a change in, I guess, faith that this was going to work, determination. I mean, there's such a change, isn't there? Not only just from a physical point of view, but from your confidence in that you had found something that worked for you. And that is really big. That shows a real shift in your mind and the stories that you told yourself, and that confidence that was growing, I guess, that confidence that you was changing. It wasn't just a whim or something that was a fad. It was there to last, wasn't it?
It definitely started to feel like that. It was bizarre in itself, but I did start to become aware of my behaviours and started thinking more positively about things in general. And I did kind of adopt a wee mantra in my head, and it was always a case of, if you can't think of a good reason to say no, just say yes and see where it leads you. I started to adopt that for everything, including so shopping. It was a case of, well, why not? I'm here. It'll save me another trip, having to come in a month's time and buy 1 size below again, so just save yourself a trip, buy it now. So things like that there. It was just the positivity. And again, it's such a cliche, but I did start to actually think like that, just in everything. If there's no good reason to say no, because there's obviously, so I started signing up for courses in work, training courses, external events, just volunteering for stuff. So I volunteered to become like a fire warden, first aid warden, just all the stuff that other people didn't even want to do, but it was the case of if they needed it. And I was like, well, I can do it, so yeah, I'll do it. And I would just sign up for, I got an email about a concert that was on, and there was last minute tickets available, and it was just like, well, I'm doing nothing on Friday night. Yeah, I'll go. And I would go to things just on my own. If I would go to the cinema on my own, just was like, I want to see that, so why not? Rather than think, well, these are all the reasons why not. So because you'll go there, you'll buy a bucket load of pick and mix and a tubby ice cream and popcorn. So what I started like, well, I want to go and see it anyway. So what can I do? What can I put in place? And it was a case of, well, I found that I would cut up a bag of carrots. I would cut up apples and put them in a wee Ziploc bag and take them to the cinema.
One of my consultants wants you to take a full chicken to the cinema. She used to take a full chicken to the cinema. Now, I don't go to that extent. I think I get kicked out. But I used to take grapes and buy mango and buy things that are not just like an apple, something that I felt was like a treat, some like more expensive fruit, I guess, to use as a treat. And that is a sign of a true weight loss guru. And, we talk about looking at your behaviours. And I know from my own experience that, we hear these things, don't we? We'll talk about mantras and how it's good to have mantras. But I think we kind of hear it. But until you really start living it, and seeing the positive consequences of taking that mantra and actually living it, do you actually start to realise, actually, yes, this does work. And the brain, the mind, it loves consistency. It loves patterns. When it grabs hold of a pattern and recognises, actually, puts it on a loop in your mind. And sometimes you have to really stand up and say, no, that isn't my story. That isn't how this story ends, and start to change those patterns. And you've clearly done that. You've clearly done that. And from the shopping experiences and going to the cinema, and I know that you met your partner now online, which I think is such a, we talk about leaps of faith. That is such a leap of faith to put yourself out there. You've got to have some sense of confidence to see or recognise that you've got something that could help build a relationship, or you've got something that is worthwhile. And when you practice self-love, you start to think, actually, I am lovable. And I think when we carry, whether it's, issues for many years, or whether it's an issue with our weight for many years. We don't really see that, do we? We don't really recognise the self-love or consider ourselves to be lovable. I'd like to know some details of this relationship. So I'm really curious to know how that evolved and how that felt for you, putting yourself out there, I guess.
It was, I think after I'd lost about 10 stone, I'd always been lucky in terms of friends. I had a couple of very, very good female friends. One of them was, Christine was very, very keen for me to sign up to this. I'd convinced myself I had nothing to offer in a relationship. So for years, because who would want to deal with the baggage of dealing with someone who eats the way I did and was the size that I was, and bringing nothing to the table in terms of a relationship. But it started to think positively about myself, and other people were starting to say, and so it was a case of, well, maybe have we look. I would never have I still had female friends, but I would never approach someone in a bar or a club to try and start up a conversation. I wouldn't even do that with other blokes. I was always very, very shy. They were brought into my circle rather than me reaching out. So they started to encourage me. So they signed me up for Tinder and Bumble, which is the one that I actually met Nicole on. So I'd been on Tinder with another girl. It hadn't worked out. She was, there was straight away, you could see there was no real sort of connection. I also picked a terrible venue for it, where we actually met. But it turned out it was my friend's bar, and there were other friends there, and I was like, I picked it in a completely different town, hoping that I wouldn't. There's no chance of anybody, and it all went wrong. It didn't work out, but I was still occasionally sort of like, well, every so often I'll have a wee look and see. So I would swipe right, then occasionally I would get a match. Clearly it wasn't that much of a catch, but I persuaded a friend to take photos. But I don't think I had much conversation. I had no experience of how to start conversations with girls, I never thought about it. I had no chat or patter, as they talk about. But there was one night where actually I matched with 3 in the space of an hour, which was like unheard of for me, absolutely. And I was talking with my friend Christine on WhatsApp about this and said, I matched with 3 of them. There's one of them has a bit of promise. There was a bit of response to straight away. There was a bit of there felt like a bit of a connection. It turns out I wasn't actually talking to Nicole. I was actually talking to a friend who had more experience and who had persuaded Nicole to sign up.
Oh, bless.
And was taking her phone off her. But there was a definite connection there. And I'd sent pics of all 3 to Christine, and Christine actually picked out, oh no, this is the one I think suits you best. And I was like, well, funny enough, that's the one there's a bit of a connection with. We're chatting away. The other 2 faded away into nothing. The conversation just died out. There was no connection there. But I was chatting away to Nicole for ages. At this point, I'd booked a holiday to go to Las Vegas, my dream holiday that I'd booked. So at this point, I was not leaving the house because I was saving up every penny I earned, either for clothes or for money to spend going to Las Vegas. So I wasn't really going out. But we were chatting away for about 2 weeks. And then she was going to Spain, so with no option to meet. She was going to Spain, and then I was going to Las Vegas. But we were still chatting. While she was over, she was sending me photos of her and her mum were out in Spain together. And then when she flew back, I literally flew out to Vegas, and I was sending her photos of all the stuff I was doing. I went to the Grand Canyon and all these experiences, gun range, all the stuff you do in America. This is the stuff I wanted to do my entire life. And then one Friday, she actually messaged me and basically said, look, do you fancy meeting up tonight? So when she'd said, do you fancy meeting up tonight? My first thought was, no, because I was in my last clean clothes. I hadn't shaved since I'd come back because I'd been jet lagged and was just trying to get through the week. But that mantra came back to me. It's just like, if you can't think of a really good reason to say no, just say yes, see where it leads. So I just said, yep, okay. We decided to meet in a bar that was right beside the train station, so that there's a taxi office right across it, so that if the date went really bad, she had a
escape
route. I had to, but we knew we had this connection. So we met up and we thought we'll meet up for a couple of drinks. And we spent basically 6 hours there chatting away. The conversation never ran dry. It clicked. It really, it was like we had a link when we've been chatting away on chat, but physically there was just a connection as well. So it went very well. The only reason it ended was because I had to get the last train home, otherwise I was stuck. So, but we immediately, like even on the train on the way down, we were arranging, like, well, that went well. That went very well, so we'll do that again. So we met up the next week. We arranged to meet with Sam, and we're chatting all the way through. And again, we'll meet for a couple of drinks and see where it goes. So, and it was a really, really good date again,
Wow. So it's like full circle with your weight loss and then meeting your partner. Would you have ever imagined this outcome? Could you have ever imagined this, this outcome? You talk about your trip abroad, saying yes to everything. Now, I do think it's good to have boundaries and say no at some point, but I think, you just seizing the opportunities, aren't you, there, which is just so, it's just so heartwarming to hear your story. The outcome has been so positive. And the reason why I love to get the full story of a slimming journey is not to, I always criticize a unicorn transformation. You'll hear this. I can't even remember how many times I've said this. And the reason is it's so important to hear why the transformation has taken place, what thoughts people have had, how low people have been, and the ridiculous things that people have told themselves year after year after year, simply because I know there'll be somebody listening now that can really relate to your story. There'll be somebody listening to this now that will be thinking, my goodness, they're telling my story. I can really relate to this. And the reason that it's so important to hear the grit and the gore of a weight loss story is so people can connect and relate. And yes, it's fantastic to have, a transformation and to see the beautiful follows that come from that. But it's even more important, I believe, to hear the grit of the journey. And, people that maybe have not heard about the podcast and that are tuning in from the beginning of thinking this is quite heavy stuff. But we need that heavy stuff. We need to get an insight into that so we can really truly relate. Your journey is life-changing, and the fact that you was able to walk through those doors after years of your friends kind of trying to help you, but you took it upon yourself to walk through those doors. And you said, haven't you, that you didn't have probably long left, and that is a reality check, and action of walking through those doors has changed your life.
I had literally resigned myself. I was convinced to be, I'd heard for years, anytime I went to the doctor, about you'll not live to be 30, you'll not live to be 40, you'll have these conditions. When I went to Vegas, that was always my dream holiday. My dream destination was because I play poker, and I organised a poker night for a while as well in the house. And I'd convinced myself that was the only place I wanted to go. But part of me still wanted that escape. And it was a case of, well, it's otherworldly. It's nothing from where I am right now. So even when I was really, really low, I was convinced I was going to go to Las Vegas, and that would be me. That would be the only place I ever wanted to go. So, but I think part of it was because it was so different from where I was living. The day-to-day life was so grim. In terms of you went to work. Like I remember you're talking about, the unicorn effect of having, like I picked out when I started. I was lucky enough that I read one of the stories of a previous guy, Dave Lancaster, who had lost 21 stone or whatever it was. And I remember reading his stuff obsessively reading his blog, reading his success story in the slimming world, just to try and focus that he did it. Why can't I? And there were times where I was struggling and I was feeling like down. I remember the first time I had an unexpected gain. I mean, part of losing weight is that sometimes you will gain weight. Sometimes you'll have bad results. It's just the fact of life. But the first time I remember I gained, and I think it was only after about 8 or 9 weeks, but it was actually at a different group because I couldn't make my regular group. So I weighed, and I just mentally I checked out. I actually left. I didn't stay for image therapy. It's one of the very group therapy. It was one of the very few times I never stayed, was because I was so embarrassed about it. And then I actually sat and rationed it out. And it was just a case of, well, I've had this unexpected result. How have I've been following the exact same plan that I was doing the week before. What happened? What changed? And basically, because it had some like 7 or 8 weeks of success with it, I just basically said, like, well, do it again. Do the exact same thing again. Just stick to your plan, stick to what you were doing, stick to what you know, and reassess next week. If it goes back on, maybe this isn't going to work. Maybe it's not going to be for you after all, even though you can feel the benefit already. And it was a case of, like, well, just stick with it and then reassess the next week. And the next week I got a good result. I got the gain off and another pound, I think it was. So I was all of a sudden I was happy. But I think that setback, you do need that setback even on the journey. And even though it was like the little one, it was a case of, like, you need to think it through. You need to reassess. You need to just refocus. But part of it was, with me, was I just needed that sort of setback. I think I really did need it, because at that point, like I've read online about people and they've had 52 weeks of losses, and I'm like, that is mind blowing to me. Like, I've weighed in over, I think it's 100. I actually sat and worked this out for this, and I can't remember what it is offhand, but it was 170 odd weeks of weigh-ins, and I've had 40 gains. Like, now, almost all of them are expected gains because I've had nights out, or I've had extra days out, or the birthdays, parties, or whatever, so usually I've food optimized, or made healthy choices or whatever. But sometimes it's just be like, yeah, well, I've had 3 nights out this week, so be it. I put on 2 pounds, put on 4 pounds, But the key was, for me, was just definitely just getting back on it. Just
back on it. And so, talking about the 40 gains there, albeit expected, it's 40 gains, but look at the outcome of that, and look at your success. For anybody listening to this that would love to, I guess, make that connection, albeit with Weight Watchers or Slimming World, or with any weight loss, with any nutritionally sound weight loss group, what piece of advice could you give to our listeners that are really inspired by what they've heard, but are still struggling to make that connect with taking action?
I mean, you have to think about what you want at the end of it. You have to think about why you signed up, because nobody walks into those groups. Nobody walks into those groups in a happy place. I mean, everybody thinks this is the worst version of me I've ever had, or I've ever been, and I want to change it. So people worry about being judged in them, and it's strange that. And I thought I was always very, very conscious, because of the size I was the biggest person in any room I walked into for 20 plus years. And I knew people were staring at me, because I'm also 6'3" as well. So I'm tall, and I stand out because of the size I was. And I was just always self-conscious of it. But I kind of realized that we're all self-conscious when we're in there. Even now, like you were saying about my consultant, about being how happy she is. My consultant is completely overwhelmed with happiness for me, and is very, very keen on singing my praises. But part of me is sitting in the group cringing, inside, because I'm still not that. I don't want that attention that much as well, one-on-one. You're still aware of it. But you just have to realize that, we're all there because we want to change. We want to change something about ourselves. We're not happy where we are. But establishing what it is that you want that makes you happy, and then refocus on what it is that you want to be, where you want to be, whether it's next week or whether it's tomorrow, whether it's a year down the line. I do think, I kind of a bit of a hypocrite here, because when I joined up, I didn't have any goals. I didn't set a goal. I deliberately didn't set a target. But you do have success. I think statistically it's been shown that you do have more success if you do set that target and aim for something, to have something down the line, no matter how far it is or how close it is, whether it's to lose a stone or to get into a new dress for a Christmas or birthday or wedding or whatever. There always seem to be dress-based goals. But yeah, I do think having that goal helps. And I do try now, because we have holidays planned, or we did before, obviously, Corona managed to come in and scupper everything. But I would set those goals where I know I have such and such in 3 weeks' time. But until then, I've got nothing. I've nowhere to be. I'm not missing out on anything. So I'll be extra, extra good those 3 weeks. And then I can relax that week and feel guilt-free. I do say that, but even when I do then go for these things, I still try and maintain a reasonable regime. I don't go out and have McDonald's for breakfast, lunch and dinner, or eat made in a restaurant and loads of beer. But if I would have alcohol, I would still have my vodka and lower calorie options, But so I'm still conscious of making good choices, even when I'm relaxing. But it's just having that goal, I think, now it's especially key for keeping me on track. Part of it is I'm conscious that because of the publicity I've had this year, I'm conscious that I don't want to turn up and be going overweight, or haven't put it back on. But that's pressure I put on myself. I don't want to be rake thin. I just want to find somewhere that I'm comfortably maintaining that.
Absolutely.
I don't want to fit into a size 32 waist, because I haven't fit into one of them since I was 14. I'm probably not going to do it. So I just want to be happy where I am, or I've found now where I'm below my target, but I'm happy where I am. So if I'm basically playing it by ear now, just stay where I am, and if I can keep comfortably at it, that's where I'm going to set my final target.
That's fantastic. And talking about what you've just said there about not wanting your consultant to shine your light, and you're feeling a bit embarrassed, I'm thinking you're on a podcast now, you're going to be all over. And you've also got an Instagram account as well. So how does that work? So the next question is, what is your Instagram handle, Phil, for anybody that wants to follow you? It's
Phil, PHIL .Kays, KAYES .SW.
This will inspire lots of people all over the world. So more attention for you. But it's been great. Thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
There's so many golden nuggets in both of Phil's episodes, but the one thing that I love is a mantra that he had on repeat to help to push him forward when normally he would have took a step back. Like what he explained about, the date night, this first date with his partner, and normally he wouldn't have gone out on that date, but he pushed himself forward for that. So not only has he made so many positive changes with his weight, with his health, his mindset has just totally changed. And I absolutely love the bravery, the honesty, the courage, everything about Phil's journey. And I hope this has inspired you. I really, really do. Thanks so much for tuning in for another episode of Slimming Stories. And wherever you listen to your podcasts, please hit subscribe. This will really help me to climb the podcast charts. So wishing you a great week ahead, and until next time, take care.